We're up.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are going to commence the Finance, Infrastructure, and Audit Committee meeting now. Our chairman, Haywood Cochran, is feeling a little under the weather and has asked for me to pitch hit for him. So once again, we're going to keep this moving as best we can under the circumstances. And first up, for an action item on ordinance regulating traffic and parking is Nate Knuffman. And Nate, just as a housekeeping matter, we're going to try and put the next four motions into one vote. So we're going to let you go through these and then we'll roll them all up.
Is this better? Testing. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. The first item, parking. Each year at this time, we bring proposed changes to the parking ordinance to you for review and approval. The changes are listed in your board materials. There are several housekeeping items dealing with date changes and other minor adjustments. There are some other changes as well. They include allowing electric assist bikes on sidewalks in a pilot project with the town of Chapel Hill. Then also some updates to permanently codify several changes that we implemented temporarily during COVID, such as use of virtual permits and a new flexible parking fee. I'm happy to address any questions.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Bullock, please.
Mr. Knuffman. So I know that during the COVID, when COVID hit for the last previous school year, it was a 100% electronic permitting of vehicles. Just to be clear, that's going to continue for all vehicles?
That's correct. We switched and allowed a new virtual permitting where really the license plate functions as the permit. It saved us a lot of administrative expense just printing. It also saved us administratively just in terms of having staffing available to process those tags. And so we plan to continue that. That's correct.
How is that going to impact the enforcement staff, particularly around high congestion areas such as the student bookstore or around Davis Library and those particular parking areas? I know that can get quite congested, and even maybe even the chancellor's parking spot over on South Building.
We're still working through some of the enforcement. We do have regular patrolling and able to assess and look at plates to ensure that compliance.
Okay, thanks. But that's worked well, and so you have a thumbnail estimate on how much money we're saving by going from the old rear view mirror permitting process to the plate process?
It's a couple $100,000 in just printing costs, and then when you layer on the cost administratively of time, there'd be additional savings.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Nate. And we're now going to hear from Dean Weber for internal audit work plan fiscal year 2022. And Dean, I'm just going to caution you that we're starting a little bit behind schedule. I know you've got a lot of slides in that deck, so we're going to try and get you to put the spurs to moving through it quickly, please.
I'll gladly do that. TJ, if you could queue up the slides. I can't see if the slides are up. There they go. Thank you. Yeah, first of all, I just want to start off by saying that we're going to change the order a little bit as they are presented within the agenda. We're going to first address attachment C, which is the Finance, Infrastructure, and Audit Committee's annual certification of compliance. And then we're going to move on to attachment B to address the internal audit risk assessment and work plan. So TJ, if you can move to the first slide. The annual compliance certification letter is attachment C, and it's on page 110 of your agenda. This item supports committee confirmation certifying the internal audit process at Chapel Hill aligns with requirements and establishments of the UNC Board of Governors. This is an annual certification process completed by the committee for submission to the system office. The certification attests to processes supporting sound financial practices, the internal audit operation and responsibilities of both the Audit Department and the Finance, Infrastructure, and Audit Committee. Moving to the next slide, I know we're going to hold the recommendations until the end, but if there's any questions on the proposed recommendation, I'd be happy to answer them at this time. If not, I'll move on to the work plan.
Any questions for Dean? Keep rolling, Dean.
All right, thank you. TJ, if you could advance to the next slide. We'll spend a little more time on this. This is the second item for consideration, and it's really, it's a very important component of what we do. It's the risk assessment and the fiscal year 2022 internal audit work plan for Carolina. This is marked as attachment B and can be found on page 82 of your materials. The plan provides an itinerary for internal audit activity, delivering assurance to this committee and to the chancellor on the evaluation of internal controls through the completion of internal audit activity at the university. The work plan preparation encompassed evaluating risks in really a fluid and engaging process. This included the analytical assessment of data. The progression focused on high-level priorities, considering and assessing potential achievement hurdles and risk impediments to goal attainment. The planning process links audit work to key areas of university operations, including areas of significant financial activity and also areas of significant complexity. Lastly, it's important for the planning process to connect both the system and university initiatives as we consider risk events and risk impediments and develop our work plan. The next slide, TJ. This information kind of highlights the multi-step development process in crafting the work plan. The first phase encompassed information assembly and review of strategic planning materials, including identifying the university's audit universe, the top 5 ERM institutional risks, the strategic plan, development of an executive leadership survey, and a financial assessment of core operations. Phase 2 was the risk assessment, and here we looked at available information, including analysis of potential impediments to defined university goals, the strategic initiative obstacles, and we looked at the regulatory and industry compliance risks as well. The third phase focused on soliciting input from stakeholders. This was completed through direct outreach, as well as analyzing responses to a risk assessment survey developed by internal audit that was completed by executive leadership. The final step is the work plan creation, where the project engagements are identified, plan is considered for approval, as we are here today, and then it's followed by a campus-wide communication and socializing the plan with the campus community. Moving to the next slide. Supporting the policy on enterprise risk management and compliance, the Board of Governors for the university system requires all member institutions to annually report their top 5 ERM risks each year. And during this year, the Office of Internal Audit supported the Vice Chancellor for Institutional Integrity and Risk Management in developing a risk management survey that was distributed to both the chancellors and the provost cabinet regarding 33 potential ERM risk topics, with results driving the submission of Carolina's top 5 ERMs for 2022 to the system office. The top 5 ERM topics include physical infrastructure, COVID-19 response, talent management, business model risk, fiduciary responsibility. For each of the 5 ERM risks, it's important for the university to manage consequential risk events and to ensure appropriate mitigation controls are present. As part of the work plan development process, internal audit linked campus operations to risks for each of these topics and incorporated them into the work plan development. We have 6 work plan engagements supporting rationale linked to the top 5 ERM risks. Moving to the next slide. We also assessed the university's strategic plan, Carolina Next, Innovations for Public Good, including recent plan revisions made this past year. The purpose was to identify and consider risks that could potentially impede realization of strategic objectives. The process evaluated the 8 strategic initiatives that contain 24 strategic objectives. Strategic opportunities were then considered in determining potential audit engagements for each of the plan's objectives that were ranked based on a scoring opinion by the Office of Internal Audit. 5 work plan engagements actually directly linked to rationale supporting mitigating potential risks of the strategic plan. Moving to the next slide. Development of the work plan also included input from senior leadership on the risk perspectives and areas where internal audit services can be effective in evaluating procedures, internal controls, and really just working to strengthen overall operations. As I mentioned, the Chancellor's and Provost's cabinet were requested to participate in a survey managed by the Office of Internal Audit. Outcomes provided a collection of leadership's perspective of risks impacting both the university and their individual areas of campus oversight. The survey focused on 9 distinct operational areas comprising 99 risk topics. Response percentages were calculated based on the respondents' answers for each topic. The topics were then grouped within categories of high, medium, and low risks based on scored results. Our proposed work plan contains 8 engagements that are directly linked to leadership's feedback on risk drivers. Moving to the next slide. The last part of the assessment was an analysis of financial magnitude and issues impacting the higher education landscape. Financial data for 14 core components of campus operations looking at revenues and expenses were assessed for fiscal year 2020. Areas of high dollar volume and high transactions, they present an increased level of audit risk. Audit planning includes 6 engagements supporting matters that we've linked back to the financial risk assessment. Separately, staying attuned of adverse risks impacting the higher education landscape is important. We look at and benchmark these risks throughout the year. The risk assessment included recognized events highlighted by leading trade and professional groups relative to colleges and universities. Our engagement planning this year has incorporated 4 audits to evaluate Carolina's risks and the control environment surrounding known areas of exposure within our industry. Moving to the next slide. The present work plan outlines 29 projects. It's a very aggressive work plan. Engagements comprise 7 operational, 9 compliance, 4 financial, and 3 information technology audits. Additionally, as part of our planning process, we allow for time to complete approximately 6 special projects where certain needs may arise during the course of the year. Moving to the next slide. An important component of the work plan development process is really consideration of staffing available to execute the proposed engagements. The Board of Trustees Finance, Infrastructure, and Audit Committee Charter requires approval in consultation with the Chancellor of the budget and resources necessary to carry out the work plan during the course of the year. All audit positions are currently staffed. The Vice Chancellor for Finance and Operations has designated appropriate funding necessary to support the office operations for fiscal year 2022. I want to mention that on a positive note, the governor's budget for fiscal year 2022 proposes state funding for 1 additional audit position at Chapel Hill. The state's Council of Internal Auditing periodically assesses internal audit staffing levels across state agencies and advises the governor on entities where staffing may be insufficient in relationship to an entity's complexity of operations. I am hopeful that this proposal remains part of the ratified budget, affording growth of a fully funded additional audit position at no cost to the university because funding will be provided by the state. So moving to the next slide, it kind of wraps up the presentation here, and I'd be happy to address any questions on the proposed work plan if there are any.
Dean, thank you very much for that concise and well-prepared deck you went through. I've got a question for you because having reviewed your previous audits, I'm always struck by the amount of detail. Is there a limit to how many of these your shop can do at any one time without sacrificing the thoroughness with which you've done everything to date?
Well, thank you. That's a good question. And what we do in the work plan is, while we propose the engagements, and this year there's 23 with 6 additional slots available, if we attain roughly 80% of that work plan engagement throughout the course of the year, I consider that a success. Certain issues arise where we can't get to everything, but this really outlines the slate of approved work that we can focus on during the course of the year. So our goal in budgeting hours and time really focuses on planning a plan, working the plan, and following through. There's always exceptions, but ultimately our goal is to provide quality, thorough reports back to this committee.
Are there any other questions from the board for Dean Weber?
I had one question.
Yes.
Trustee Kobe. In terms of prioritizing the audits, is it based on that risk assessment chart that you had that with 30% being high and coming on down?
Yes, it is. The work plan really encompassed risks from all those various areas. And what we will do in our prioritization of the engagements will be working within the top risks of each of those categories, working down to address those first and then moving down to the lower level risks identified through the assessment.
Okay. I'd probably raise the technology one a little higher given the ransomware spate and having to sit in the gas line like I imagine most of you recently.
Yes, yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And you will be receiving shortly, we're going to be issuing out some continuous auditing work that we've done throughout the year on IT. So please look forward to that in the coming months. It should be a good report on the status of IT, certain IT operations here at the university, which, some reassurance that they're being controlled and managed well.
Dean, I've got one more for you. Just out of curiosity, I think that you went on, will it be 2 years ago in July? When you?
2 years in May, sir.
May, okay. Yes. So, and boy, what a wild ride it's been, given everything that's happened. Is there anything that you worry about that we ought to know about?
No, I mean, I think, obviously the chancellor and senior leadership, we have a good working relationship audit with the senior leadership team. And we're very much in this process now maintained in the loop. And so we work closely with those individuals and have opportunities for feedback and to provide advice and counsel on different aspects as they arise. As an example, this past year, we've created the pandemic funding and assessment committee, and we've worked closely with leadership on all the special grant money that we've received, and there's a lot of compliance around that. So, I really want to acknowledge leadership and their welcoming me and kind of restructuring this function as well to make it much more inclusive in the work we do. And we really partner now to try and mitigate and address these issues, being having some forethought into what could come down the pike. And likewise with the establishment of George Battle in his area, we're working very closely with that team on risk management and the ERM issues. So while certainly something can pop up, I think that, there's some assurance now that we have some good working relationships across the campus.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, you want to get into the audit certification letter because we're going to roll all of these into one motion.
Yes, we covered that one initially first.
Oh, I'm sorry. So that was it at the very beginning.
That was the very beginning one. We just switched the order and did that one first and then the work plan. Yes, sir. Okay,
thank you. Then we're going to go back to Nate Knuffman on the spending authority. And then after that, we're going to have another one on associated entities approval.
Great. Spending authority. The Board of Governors recently delegated to the Board of Trustees approval of advanced planning if projects are funded with all non-general fund money. We're requesting advanced planning for 3 athletics projects, each at $500,000 of non-general fund dollars. The first project is Keenan Football Center renovations, which houses locker rooms, weight room, training room, equipment room, players lounge, study areas, coach's office, and meeting rooms for the Carolina football program. The second project is reconstruction of 12 existing outdoor tennis courts, along with lighting, spectator seating, a new building for locker rooms, offices, and player areas. The third project is reworking Finley Golf Course. It's creating 2 new holes and a new team range and short course area and building. And again, this request is advanced planning at $500,000 for each. The fund source is gifts. We already have that funding, and the gifts were raised by the Educational Foundation. Happy to address any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Knuffman? Trustee Bullock.
Mr. Chairman, if Mr. Steinbacher, I know that he's here on behalf of the athletic department. Could you feel good about the fact that the authorization of $500,000 per project does not necessarily mean that the athletic department is going to spend the entire $500,000 in terms of advanced planning? That's the authorization. that we're giving and the money coming from the Educational Foundation. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? If not, then if you would please, let's go to the associated entities approval, please.
Sure. So another recent system office policy change on associated entities requires Board of Trustee approval of new associated entities. Previously, only the chancellor needed to approve. We happen to have 2 entities in the pipeline, and we are seeking your approval for those 2 associated entities today. The first is the General Alumni Association. The university has enjoyed a long and beneficial relationship with GAA, and more recently, we've been working to formalize that relationship through this action. The second is a student investment fund within Keenan Flagler Business School. This provides students with hands-on experience operating a private investment fund. This fund will be the 8th investment fund created since 2007. Under system policy, the Board of Governors has to approve the establishment of any for-profit entity, and they have been supportive of this type of program over the last several years. It is scheduled for approval on next week's Board of Governor agenda. Happy to address any questions.
Trustee Bullock.
I hate to keep peppering you, Mr. Nuffman, but question on the for-profit status of the business school fund. What is the necessity of that being a for-profit fund, and who profits from it, and how are the taxes then paid?
Sure. Well, the structure of the fund is really to replicate real-world experience, and the intent is to provide the students with real-world hands-on experience. And so this is I think the 8th fund. We've had 7 since. And so taxes, I believe, would be taxed income realized for the individuals participating in the fund, and they'd have to realize that income and be taxed appropriately. There is a representative from the business school on Zoom that may be available to address that in more detail.
Yeah, so I just was curious about it. My understanding, and you correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't need any other explanation, is that students take their own money and put into this fund. Is that what it is, or is the university put money into that?
My son was on that committee and got his real estate MBA here. So I happen to know the answer. Part of the reason they've got to be a for-profit is by having the outside investors come into the fund that get K-1s and get the reporting. It's a for-profit because all of it, like even our investment as a foundation, we're trying to make money on whatever our investment is, but they have the outside investors in this nonprofit scene of a university. So it becomes a for-profit mainly for the outside investors.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to, I think it's a great program. I know, like I said, I know Chuck's sons went through it, and I've had several folks from Fayetteville whose students have gone through that and been involved in those. I think that's really one of the things that sets Keenan Flagler apart is innovation in terms of giving our students real world experience. So I'm certainly in favor of it. I just wanted some clarification. Thanks.
Any further questions? If not, then I'm going to entertain a motion for action on the ordinance regulating traffic and parking, which becomes effective August 15th. The Office of Internal Audit Work Plan for 2022, the Annual Audit Certification Letter 2021, the approval of the associated entity status, and spending authority for the football center renovations, the tennis center renovations, and the Finley Golf Course additions.
So second.
Trustee Duckett and a second by Trustee Davis. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Next up, we have the designer selection for Marsico Hall and Energy Management Control Systems.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
I have a conflict or potential conflict of interest on both these items, so I'd like to asked to abstain from both the discussion and the vote. And should you bring these forward tomorrow to the full board meeting, if you could break those out as separate action, I would be very grateful.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, we will do that. Okay, Nate, would you like to go forward?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Designer selection. We're requesting approval for 2 designer selections. The first is renovation of the UNC Biomedical Research Imaging Center small animal imaging facility to house a new MRI and equipment room. The budget for advanced planning is $300,000 and funded through clinical receipts. The second is a replacement of outdated building automation systems. That project budget is $3.25 million and funded with university trust funds. And you'll remember previously approving that as part of our self-liquidating approvals in the past. For both projects, the designer firms are recommended in priority order in your board materials. Happy to address any questions.
Any questions on these items? Okay, if not, as duly noted by Chairman Stevens, who's recusing himself, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Chairman, that's Trustee Davis there. Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much, Nate, for those presentations. And we are now going to move to Evan on the preliminary design review for the additions at the Keenan Flagler Business School. So whenever you are ready, Evan.
Thank you. We can go to the next slide, or the first slide, should I say. Great. So I'm here today to talk about a project for the Keenan Flagler Business School. We call it the McCall Building Renovation Addition Project. We've actually brought this project to this body in the past, and you can see the schedule there for both approval of designer selection, site approval, as well as approval of the construction manager at risk. So those schedule items have already happened. We're currently in the design development phase. We provided a few milestones upcoming for the remainder of this project. It's a very exciting project, critical for the success of Keenan Flagler. Reminder on the budget for the project, it's a total of $150 million budget, of which the state has committed appropriations in total over time of $75 million to match a fundraising target by the Keenan Flagler Business School. As you can see on the notes on the slide, Keenan Flagler has already received pledges in excess of that amount. So next slide. A reminder of the significant impact that this project will have both on the workforce pipeline for North Carolina. You can see some of the statistics of recent graduates and their placement very soon after graduation. And then there's the issue of rising demand. This was an important part of the initial appropriation by the state to meet the rising demand and to have Keenan Flagler be able to meet that through increased facilities. So the growth as over time, this growth has already happened in enrollment at Keenan Flagler in the undergraduate business program. And as that growth increases, so will the percentage of North Carolina graduates coming out of the program. Next slide. So this is a overall campus site plan that the image you see is from our 2019 campus master plan. And the location of the project is adjacent to the existing McCall building at Keenan Flagler's area on the south part of campus. Next slide. This is an aerial view where you can see the existing conditions. So in a yellow outline is the project site, which is adjacent to the existing business school parking deck. And then there would be a connection back to the McCall building, which is the first building you see that it's being connected to. To the left of McCall building is the Keenan Center building. So you'll see there's quite a lot of infrastructure in terms of the parking and the roadway. And then there's a significant open space amenity in the forest to the west of the site. Next slide. This overall kind of neighborhood site plan shows how the intended new facility in its current state of design would sit relative to both the McCall building, the parking deck, and Blythe Drive in the context of the master plan. I think that that's important to note at this point, that the master plan foresaw a project, a new building facility on this site, as well as other new construction in the redevelopment zone on the south part of campus, as we've demolished a number of the Odom Village buildings. So you'll see, for example, just to the west is a building site for another significant new building. So this is really part of an assemblage over time of the growth of the southern part of the campus. It also really speaks to Kenan-Flagler reaching out to the rest of campus as it sits today up on its hill. It's somewhat isolated from the rest of campus, and we looked at a number of sites at the beginning of this project for where to put the new building. And there was concurrence that this site was by far the best site because, among other things, it reaches out to the rest of campus and deals with that significant topography on this part of campus. So it connects to Blythe Drive. It allows for easier connections to other campus facilities. It connects to the parking facility, which is not insignificant. And it takes advantage of the amenity of the forest to the west. Next slide. Just a little bit closer in so you can understand in greater detail how the new facility would connect to those existing buildings, the road on Blythe and the forest. It's really creating a new front door for Kenan-Flagler, which is quite exciting for the school and for the campus at large, I would suggest. Next slide. So now a few images of the current state of the design. Again, we're in the design development phase, which is sort of the midpoint, I would say, of the design phase, where we've developed the design enough to really understand and bring to you a sense of what this facility would look like, how it interacts with adjacent buildings on the site. And we have some confirmation that this building can be built within the budget allocated for the project. So the initial view up on the screen now is the view from Kenan Drive. So driving up that hill, if you're familiar with the driveway, you see in the foreground is the parking deck, the existing McCall building off to the left, and then the new building, which from this view really extends the architecture and language of the existing building of McCall out towards Blythe Drive. A similar language of reddish brick with the tall, narrow window fenestration pattern that really mimics a lot of the elements in the McCall building. So it was important to really take the heritage and the context of the existing McCall building and extend that out towards the north. Next slide. So then moving up north from the prior view, we're now on Blythe Drive as if we're heading west. So you'll see the existing parking deck in the foreground on the left. Now it's important to note here that parking deck does not have an entry on Blythe Drive. And that's been a source of contention among many because it limits the ability to get in and out of that deck. So this would create a new entry on Blythe Drive just adjacent to a new front door. So that's a significant benefit for the school and taking advantage of all that existing parking right next door.
Evan, can I ask you a question just while you got this slide?
Of course.
Just the non-expert analysis, but when I look at this and I know that parking deck well, and we have a habit around here of building some pretty ugly parking decks in previous years. There's some that look great now, like the bell tower deck and things like that. If we're on the front of that building, that facade, to tie that to the parking deck, can we reverse that out possibly and put the brick just on the facade when you build that new entry? I mean, have y'all looked at that, or I think I understand what you're doing, but would it be possible if it all tied more like McCall, even just that side of the deck, because you're not going to see the whole deck? One led to the other. Can that be reversed is my question.
if I understand your question or the point you're trying to make is, could we add a facade on the north side of the parking deck that's more sympathetic to the McCall building? Is that it?
Yes, because, and then you don't have to change that, you could change that front facade of the new building as well. This be like the brick of the rest of the building. Does that make sense?
I'm still not sure we're totally on the same page, but I wanted to point out that in this design, we're not actually adding any new facade or elements onto the parking deck. We're blowing a hole in the facade and building a little bridge to get to it. It's only about 20 feet.
Right.
But you know, we're reutilizing the existing facade of the parking deck.
I understand that. That's, and
Okay.
what I'm asking is, can you take just that one side facing
Of the deck.
off the facade? You're taking a big portion of it off anyway and match
Yeah.
it up to the brick of the whole building and not try and tie the building into what is
I see.
an ugly deck. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that is worth exploring. Obviously, it would be another expense.
I mean, we're spending $150 million and this is incredibly important to this state.
Yeah.
And I just think it's just a little bitty finishing touch that's a rounding error in the 150.
I agree. It's probably not as significant in the overall, and I appreciate the suggestion. I think that's something we should look at with the design team. So thank you for that. So just finishing off on this slide, you see that eastern bar, as we've come to call it, of the new building, turn the corner with its brick expression, and you can start to see a different expression as it moves towards the west. So in the next slide, you'll be able to see that in much greater detail. As the building turns towards the west, it really is facing a much different condition, which is that existing forest. And the concept here was both to take advantage of the views to that forest and the amenity that it creates, both visually and experientially, to be able to walk out of the building and be outdoors and be in the forest, but also in a way to suggest a new century, that the Kenyon-Flagler Business School is looking forward towards the future and to have a somewhat different expression on this side of the building. The walkway that you see here is from Blythe Drive, stepping onto a walkway that will continue alongside the building and allow pedestrians to complete a pathway from Blythe all the way to the Old Mason Farm south of the Corey Auditorium, if you're familiar with that piece of the Kenyon-Flagler campus, without ever having to go inside a building. So it, again, is creating a campus-wide amenity here for pedestrians in that area, in a part of campus in which there is a lack of good pedestrian connectivity. And I will point out that's an important part of our master plan also, was to improve connections across campus. Next slide, please. As we move towards the south, you can start to feel how this building interacts with its landscape, how the significant amenity of this green open space, this beautiful forest, which is sort of foundational to this campus, and how important it is to the identity of what Carolina is really celebrated here. With a building that opens up to the forest, opens up to the landscape, and allows for a number of new outdoor spaces for students, faculty, visitors, staff, all of those constituent groups to enjoy the outdoors. Next slide. And then here we're standing at the southern end of the new building, looking back up towards Blythe Drive. The existing McCall building is behind us in this view. So you'll see kind of at the midpoint of the building, that exterior walkway that continues all the way through the Kenyon-Flagler area towards Old Mason Farm Road. And you can see some of the outdoor spaces. There's a dining facility that expands on the dining currently available in McCall, with some outdoor space, some student study space that has an outdoor component off of it. Next slide. And then this is the connecting bridge between the new building and McCall, again, allowing for another amenity for the school and for the campus at large, because it's open to all on that pedestrian pathway that I was speaking to. And I believe that that is the last slide. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, questions? I've got a few, but for Trustee Bullock?
Yeah, Evan, good afternoon. And I'd like you to speak to, if you would, and I see the pedestrian outside walkway, and I understand, and I appreciate what I believe you expressed as the design concept of moving that building forward and taking advantage of nature. I have some concern with respect to the maintenance of that porch. That is a big porch. That porch spans the entire building. And I just have a question of the utility of that porch and what that's going to cost. Every time it rains and every time the leaves fall, we're going to be blowing leaves off that porch. And also the fact that that porch and that glass wall faces the setting sun. So I also have a little bit of concern with respect to energy costs. I just kind of wanted to throw that out there and see if you had contemplated that and if that has been part of the design process.
Excellent points that you bring up, and the sort of the maintenance piece first is something that we have talked about. We're really trying to get ahead of that curve, I would say. So you brought up a question of leaves, and so we're sort of trying to see if we can keep the trees trimmed back or slightly away, or at least slightly smaller as it gets to the building, to address that buildup of leaves in the fall. There may be some occasions for icing on that walkway, and that's a concern, but it's in some ways not so different from all the other walkways that we provide on campus. So it's a bit of a trade-off. We do maintain all the walkways on campus. It isn't part of the campus that has a deficiency in those walkways. So we're trying to balance those needs and those maintenance requirements that come with it. As regards the energy efficiency, that's something we are taking very seriously. And I should have mentioned actually during my presentation of the project that this project is being designed with one of the tightest requirements for energy performance. So we think it'll be one of the highest performing projects for energy use on campus. And it's something that Keenan Flagler has spoken about in a number of times during this process, that that's important to them. They think that's tied to how business will be conducted in the future. And so thinking about energy use is something that we've taken quite seriously. So there is a metric that's referred to as EUI, and we're currently projecting one of the lowest EUIs that we have for any building on campus.
Chairman Stevens.
Mr. Chairman, I know this is just preliminary design. I won't be here when you take up the final design, but I don't like it. The view from the forest, if you put that slide back up. No, not the pavilion, the forest. Next one. That one. If you put a paddle wheel on that, you got a Mississippi Delta riverboat. I don't think it fits. I just don't. I hope y'all take a real hard look at this. Got a lot of open porches. This is a $150 million project, and we're getting 140,000 square feet. What's that, $1,100 a square foot? It seems like an expensive project. I just hope you'll take a hard look at this, those of you going to remain on the board of the new ones, before you go forward with this project. Just 2 cents worth.
Evan, my wife and daughter tend to paint, so I'm very circumspect in how I critique their artwork. It's always beautiful. So please just, I have to kind of agree with Chairman Stevens on that. My first reaction is it does look a lot like a Mississippi riverboat without the paddle wheel. And I heard you reference the General Assembly has committed $75 million for this. I just would like to clarify, to date, I don't believe we have received that money yet, have we?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other comments? Yeah, please, Trustee Hopkins.
I'm not on your committee, so thank you for allowing me to speak up. But I'd just like to support the chair's comments that, I want to really echo that I hope we can keep it I was privileged to watch the Keenan Flagler building. My father was part of the groundbreaking. And it's very important to me that we keep the integrity of the initial design. And so I hope that we can take all of that into account as you come up with your final renderings. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
If I could just add, though, with respect to the funding, it is my understanding, Nate, that $75 million is there committed with a match. And we've now raised, I believe, in talking to Doug Shackelford recently, over $76 million. And I think Dean Shackelford may be with us. Could you clarify that?
That's right. The General Assembly did identify it as a project for future funding, and it was contingent on us raising the $75 million, which, as you noted, we've been very successful in terms of already having 77 million pledged, but it also will require further action by the General Assembly, so they will have to act to actually appropriate that funding.
Since Dean Shackelford is with us, anything you want to add or clarify, Doug?
Yeah, one thing I would add is it is $150 million, but the actual building itself is 110. Dave Stevens is here, and Dave can correct me if I've missed it. The other 40 million go to parking and also to renovations to the McCall building and to the Keenan Center. So the building itself does not cost 150 itself.
Any further questions for Evan? Thank you very much for the presentation, and obviously we'll be having more discussion about this.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we're going to get a development report from the Vice Chancellor of Development, David Ruth.
Sir, get the slides up. I think we can do this. All right, fairly traditional campaign update. Next slide, TJ. So you're used to seeing this slide. This is our campaign infographic. As of this week, actually on Monday, we updated the numbers for the presentation today. We had 2-week-old numbers in your earlier packet because that's what we had. So we currently sit at $3,761,000,000. You can see that's 89% of goal, 80% of time elapsed. Closing in on 200,000 donors in this campaign. You'll see on the next slide, and we won't go there for a second, TJ, but we are nicely comparing to the previous year, over $400 million for this year. And we think we can be in the range of $550 million again. If we can, at the end of the fiscal year, that would put that campaign number at about $3.9 billion. It would also have us surpassing $3.85 billion, which will actually make this campaign the largest completed campaign in the South. So Duke completed a campaign of $3.85 billion, not that we're competitive anywhere, anytime, but between now and the end of the fiscal year, we could hit that number, and hopefully we will nudge the $3.9 billion number. So next slide, please. So where we sit in this particular year, $408 million in hand, signed, documented. It's about 8% behind last year. Before I even put up the click on the next slide, you can see we're actually ahead of the previous year. Next click, TJ. So that's actually 2% ahead of a year that was $600 million. And also, sniffing the campaign launch year, again, a very competitive year, especially given the constraints we've had about having people to campus, being able to travel, having access to our donors like we are accustomed to having it. Next slide. Cash is actually running 5% ahead of last year, and last year was a record year for cash. So We continue to be very encouraged with the way people are paying their pledges, and this has actually been a good year in the market. It's a good year to pay things, even to accelerate things, but cash running 5% ahead of last year. Next slide. When we last met, we were just days away from our Give UNC Day. We had told you that we raised $7.8 million in the previous year's Give UNC Day. We thought early we were having a good year. We had a particularly good year when you got it all ticked and tied. It was over $12 million this year with gifts from almost 11,000 people. And folks, this is the day that's the noisiest day of the year. All of our smaller units can have the same kind of platform that our big units have and send things out through their social channels. And, you know, one of the nice stories of this year, the American Indian Center decided to really focus on this day, use this day. They raised more on a single day than they'd ever raised in an entire year. And they were on the leaderboard at Carolina in the top 10 units in terms of number of gifts and for a while even dollars. And that's the kind of day Give UNC is. It's a day we all get around and we're cheerleaders. Next slide. Finally, we talked about the Roy and Wanda Williams gift the last time we were here, but you've seen we're now in the market with invitation for any alum, small gift or large gift or very large gift, to say thank you to Roy Williams for his service to the University of North Carolina and match, not match, but join Roy and Wanda in the things they've cared about giving to. If you remember, it's the Carolina Covenant Program, which is near and dear to our hearts and critical to our financial success. It's the Chancellor Science Scholars Program, which is a spectacular program for underrepresented minorities to get into a research track. And Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett was in that program at UMBC, which was the original program called the Meyerhoff Program. We're now seen to have the strongest, largest program like the Meyerhoff Program, but that's the program that Dr. Corbett came through. And folks, we have a great program there too. Second program they gave to, and the third is athletic scholarships. So anyone who would like to make a gift to any of those areas, which they're popular areas, can give that gift and be a part of a thank you to Roy and Wanda. I will tell you, we've gotten some pretty cool calls and pretty cool gifts. Can't say who they are, but well-known names across the country. Some we see all the time.
Can you give us a hint?
No, sir. Sorry.
Just a little. That was such a tease.
No, I can't. But suffice it to say, there are a lot of people who want to thank Roy and Wanda, CEOs from a lot of different corners stepping up to say thank you. So anyway, that's my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, David.
Happy to
Any
answer any
questions for Vice Chancellor Ruth? Okay, moving right along then, we're going to hear from Vice Chancellor of Finance, Nate Knuffman, one more time on a budget update.
Yes. Today, I want to speak to you about our all funds budgeting process at Carolina. I've been asked to present this information on this topic to the Board of Governors next week, and I wanted to share this presentation with you today. First slide, please. So what I'd like to cover is one, what is an all funds budget? Why have we gone down this path at Carolina? Show our numbers for the first time at UNC-Chapel Hill broadly, and then an example unit in the UNC system office defined template. And then lastly, kind of reflect a little bit on just lessons learned at this point in our process. So first, why are we going down this path of an all funds budget? Well, one, it's important to understand our broader framework in our environment. We continue to see pressures on our primary revenue sources, tuition and appropriation. These constraints really put a premium on managing the expense side of the equation. And so the all funds budget allows us to see better on expenses. Number two, really, when you think about Carolina, we are extremely decentralized, and it's difficult to really make decisions institution-wide. Again, seeing from the institution and seeing how things fit together institutionally from financial perspective. And then lastly, really, we have ambitious goals as part of Carolina Next and the system strategic plan. And we know that will require investments and funding. And so again, managing the expense side is important. Next slide, please. So what is an all funds budget and why? Why are we pursuing this? So number one, an all funds budget is a comprehensive campus-wide annual financial plan by fund source. And it's important because prior to really having this in hand, we relied on the annual financial report to really assess how we were doing financially. There's several drawbacks to doing that. It aggregates, the financial report aggregates operating funds, but doesn't show performance on an individual fund basis. It also isn't a plan or a prospective plan, it's retrospective. And so it's very difficult to actually compare that plan or how we're executing or managing on that moving forward. So when we think about the all funds budget, really the key components where we are able to see things at a unique fund level, we can ensure that the funds balance, and also we can again monitor performance relative to plan. Next slide, please. So in pursuing an all funds budget, there were some challenges that we overcame on campus and are overcoming. First, limited and fragmented tools. When we had a very challenging ERP implementation and did not implement a campus-wide budget formulation and reporting tool at that time, which was a challenge. Also, position management to inform personnel planning was not integrated. Across units, we had widely varying formats for tracking budget, which made it very difficult to have conversations about financial planning using different terms and different ways to think about how finances lined up. Third, units were afraid by going to a standard format, they would not be able to meet either their dean or their unit leadership's needs in terms of informing decisions. And then lastly, trust was really a key variable and a key thing that we needed to build in the process. We lacked a stable commitment to process. We'd had turnover in leadership. It's a lot of investment to spend time building a standard template and really invest the time and resources to pursue that. And so we needed that stability. Also, we struggled some with transparency of just information in this area. And so that also built up some distrust over time. We've really been working hard at trying to have more conversations about financial matters, both at the university-wide perspective centrally, and then also in unit levels as well. Next slide, please. So how did we tackle the all funds budget process? Well, first step was really in a big consideration was collaboration. We had a campus working group began as far back as 2018. And that group really highlighted the need for an all funds budget. It paused a shift at that time in the campus towards an RCM, resource centered management budget approach. Then another working group in 2019 really developed the template or standard format and the process for the all funds budget moving forward. Since then, we've had at least annual meetings with unit leadership each year. This past year, it was more than annual. It was more than one. It was several different meetings throughout the year with leadership, and we envision that continuing to move forward. That's been a big step towards helping us build trust across the campus. The second area is really just commonality. We needed a common language to speak in talking about financial management. And then the third area with tools. And really, we leveraged what we had, existing tools. And that involved really defining the template in Excel, using that to really have a common format, using the data from our ERP to really set a baseline for expenditures and revenues. And then lastly, we developed a dashboard in Tableau really to sit on top and be able to help us with visualization and analytics on the information on the back end. And those are the tools we really relied on. Next slide, please. So here we're looking at the all funds budget for the fiscal year 2021 for UNC-Chapel Hill in totality. These are dollars and millions. And again, this is in the format as prescribed from the system office through a working group that's working through this at the system level. And so, and you'll see on the top half of the sheet, the major revenue categories in rows, In the bottom half, you'll see the major categories and expenses in rows. And then our columns, general funds and trust funds. In general funds, you really have appropriation and tuition. And then on the trust funds, it's largely comprised that's everything else. So your auxiliary funding, your research funding, your gifts, fundraising, fees are all in the trust fund category. I think the first thing to note is really if we were to focus just on general fund, you would really exclude or not see almost 3/4 of the activity at the university in the trust, because the trust funds are so significant at a university like North Carolina Chapel Hill, where there's such a large research component. I think that's the second key component. When you look at the trust funds and you see the grants and contracts line, you see the sizable contribution of research. It really reflects our mission here at the university. Three, I think you'll see that our clinical operations are sizable, and they feed in largely into that sales and services row as well on the revenue side. And so you see how significant that is, again, at our institution. I think when you turn over to the spending side, you'll note that, likely not a surprise, over half of our spend is in personnel. But I think what is noteworthy is 2/3 of our personnel are really funded on trust funds. So again, reflecting a lot of the research and clinical components and the auxiliary components and how much of a fund source that is for our personnel at the university and our workforce. And we'll actually be talking about that some at the Board of Governors next week as well, talking through workforce across the system. And I think that's a key component of understanding what Carolina looks like.
If I could just add to that, I think it's also professorships, and so salaries that are paid off of professorships are in that trust fund line as well, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So again, that was surprising whenever Nate and I went over this last week. Looking at this, I think it speaks volumes of the importance of the extramural funding through research, as well as the development. And David just provided an update on where we are there. And again, it's a big enterprise, and it takes 2/3 of it's happening from outside the general fund to keep our people whole and carrying out the mission.
That's right.
Thanks.
The only other thing I'd note on this slide is you'll see the other expenses line on the trust funds, and it's fairly significant, a big dollar amount. That largely reflects our research expenses. We had a little bit of trouble just in terms of mapping the way we track research expense to this template. And so that may be something that we're able to pursue more with the system office in terms of a better way to capture this moving forward. Next slide, please. So here we were asked also to provide the all funds template and show and use an example of one of our units on campus in that format. And we picked Gillings, and I think why is pretty straightforward when you think about the spotlight on the work of that school in the last year. It's very appropriate. I know we'll be hearing from Dr. Barrick tomorrow, and so it made a lot of sense to us to show them. They're also the 3rd largest academic school, and they are a good representation of a research-intensive academic school. And so I think the takeaways, again, in terms of the message is really similar to the pan-campus view. The trust funds are very important. Again, if we were only looking at general funds, which has been I think the focus more of the system and really at the campus level, you'd be missing 3/4 or larger of the activity in this unit. Again, looking at the research productivity really stands out when we look at the grants and contracts line on the revenue side. You'll also see significant gifts and fundraising, again, very, very notable. I think on the expenditures, similar to Pan Campus, personnel is the largest area of expense, but again, a large portion are funded on trust funds, not on general fund. And I do think the other thing to note is, again, a similar story on the other expenses. That's where you see a lot of the research expense that we had trouble mapping, and so that's showing up in that number. Next slide, please. So another key consideration for us in developing the all funds budget process on campus was really governance, and really really it's the next phase in the maturation of the budget process on campus. And it's about increased accountability and fiscal management. Note quarterly reports on fiscal performance. That's really a standard and best practice, and something that will allow us to more quickly see issues that may be arising. A budget committee for out-of-cycle requests to ensure that there's a process and a more holistic view of requests that come in for funding, as opposed to doing things on an ad hoc basis. We're a very decentralized campus, and with that comes questions, and I think a review of fund authority and the number of fund authority and the management expertise we have around that. Also, we've been really looking at the reserve levels, the policy on that, and the management, especially in light of COVID and the way that's impacted our reserves, and how much it's showed us how important those reserves can be to the operation of a unit. And so thinking about what policy and what management policy guidance should be around that. And then lastly, of course, engagement with the Board of Trustees and stronger engagement is a very important component moving forward. I know the Chancellor feels strongly about this topic. I don't know if you'd like to add on to this at all.
I'd just like to say that Nate and Steve Agostini and their team's done an incredible job. This has been a very labor-intensive 2.5 to 3 year process, really to get us to this point. As you know, we talked at the last meeting about the budget reductions and the way we were implementing that. Could not be happier with where we are right now. Nate and I are optimistic that while we set the goal of having a balanced budget by June of 2022, it's looking like we're going to be closer to that by December of this year. And I think a lot of this is going to be centered around the governance changes. The dashboards that have been created allow us to go on at any given point, we can go into a unit and look to see exactly, in fact, it's more detailed than what Nate produced on the 2 previous slides for each unit. And that's really going to be important. So it's about transparency. It's about a more disciplined budgeting process and spending. And I think, one of the things we learned during this pandemic is the importance of having strong reserves in our auxiliary units with housing, dining, parking, athletics. This has really been important, and there's going to be something else at some point, and we have to be sure that we have set some expectations on what those reserves should be. We're building back up our F&A reserve fund, which is was spent down significantly back around 2013, 14. And so we're building that back up, which is also going to be important if we're going to run a research enterprise like we know that we need to be running at Carolina. So I just want to, again, thank Nate and team, but it's going to take, the strict governance process will create the discipline we need. Thanks.
Next slide, please.
Excuse me, Trustee Hopkins wants to chime in. And just so you know, we're bumping up on 3:15, but we started 5 minutes late. So I'm going to give you another 5 minutes.
Thank you again for allowing me to speak. I just want to commend you on your efforts with this. It's been something that the trustees have been asking for quite a while. It's also something Board of Governors. And I know it's been quite a challenge to get to this point. And I know many people cannot understand, well, how could it be so challenging? Only those that have really worked on it can understand the challenges and the monumental task that you've taken on. So I just applaud you and thank you for your efforts. Our university will be better for this and everybody that works together to achieve this goal. So thank you all. And thank you, Chancellor.
Thank you very much. We're fortunate to have a great team working on it. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. I have one more slide.
Right.
That's
Please.
wrap up, and I will be very brief.
Lessons learned.
I think major takeaways. First, very labor intensive. I think it requires significant collaboration and really time. We've spent 3 years getting to this point. Second key consideration is really building trust is really important. Spending that time early on, having those conversations where resources weren't being reallocated, but we were really building a collective understanding of our finances was really important, so that now we're at the stage where we can really make resource allocation decisions. And I think there's greater awareness, understanding, and really acceptance of that. And I think that's really important. I think it's also worth noting, recently we had conversations with rating agencies. And in those discussions, it was clear to us a lot of higher education is moving in this direction, which I think, number one, strengthened, at least my assessment that really it confirms the prioritization of this work, the system level moving in this direction and what we've been doing on campus. More directly at Carolina, the feedback was that we were well positioned. We were ahead of peers for the earlier efforts we had done in this area, and that we were well positioned moving forward, which was great to hear. I think the last point I wanted to make too is building on what the chancellor just said, is really it requires, to be successful, probably most importantly, executive sponsorship. And chancellor's been great in terms of active engagement on fiscal management. And I think that's been a really important ingredient of moving this forward.
Thank you very much. And just to echo what Trustee Hopkins said, so everyone knows, and Trustee Kobe and I were on the search committee for the Vice Chancellor of Finance, and I just can't thank everybody enough for the work on that, because what we heard today is something that it's, for those of us that run businesses or have a household budget, it's unfathomable that you don't have an all funds budget at this university, and now we will have one. So thank you for everything you've done. Any other questions from the board for Vice Chancellor Knuffman before I ask for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Trustee Kobe.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned. And Haywood, you can critique me anytime now.
Got it. Thank you.
Do we have enough people?
We're good to go.
Okay. I'd like to call for the start of the University Affairs meeting for May 2021. This is my 48th University Affairs meeting and 6 years of being head of this committee, and I've loved it. I really have. I've met so many great people around this university, and I'm thankful for that. But I do have a few comments that I want to make. They're important to me, and they're personal comments. As I leave this board after 8 years. And what I want to do is I want to ask all people that are involved working on behalf of this great university to love it, to take the time to know more about it than the headlines present. And some of the things for that are some of the basic facts about Carolina that really matter. We're one of the very best universities in the world, period. Carolina is doing better and is ranked higher by most any standard of measure in our history. We are a top 5 research university and the only one in the top 10 without an engineering school. We had the highest applications again this year by a wide margin. This is on top of record applications each year for the past decade or more. Carolina continues to admit the strongest students in both undergraduate and graduate programs in our history, and admitted the strongest academic class in our history even during the pandemic. It matters. Top students, top faculty, and great researchers want to be here. We've accomplished this while growing enrollment significantly over the last 10 years. Understanding that our state continues to grow, we've just finished a careful study of the enrollment growth moving forward. Carolina must grow responsibly, yet be very careful to maintain the competitive, top-rated position that this university has earned. The best students want to compete with the best in the classroom. They want to learn in person and interact in person with our great faculty. UNC-Chapel Hill leads a great university system, and we must all work together to protect both the incredible value that Carolina provides students as well as the significant economic impact that UNC-Chapel Hill absolutely delivers to the state of North Carolina. Our rankings in most any publication or study are rising. We have 30+ graduate programs ranked in the top 10 nationally. That's incredible. It's amazing, and we should be very proud. Great students and great faculty want to study here, want to work here, and UNC-Chapel Hill, importantly, is a destination university, and it's vitally important that we retain that as we move forward in our quest for education. A word of advice to students or faculty pushing for additional total pass-fail grading. I say no. This is a world-class research university that competes with the best, and I repeat, competes. You had to compete successfully to work here or study here. You deserve to be here. If you won't pass, fail, or easy path, you're hurting yourself in this university, in my opinion. Celebrate that somewhere else. Pass-fail grading will not get you into a credible graduate program or help you be a great employee, an all-important teacher, or a true leader. You must understand that you're actually marginalized when we expect less or demand less of you than you're capable of producing. One other key point I want to highlight is that in the survey done to understand free speech and the ability to express one's opinions, the results clearly showed that students felt most shut down by students, not by faculty. We must all work together to change that and to encourage and support diversity of thought and freedom of speech at UNC-Chapel Hill. To the faculty, this university is where it is due to many that have gone before us, great ones that have gone before us. It's great because we've invested in and support a world-class faculty. I encourage you all to fully support free speech, civil discussion, and life-changing research. Also, I charge you to support this Chancellor Kevin Guskowitz, who came from the faculty. He's exceedingly bright and humble at the same time. He deserves your full support and not silly questions about his character. To all people in leadership positions and boards involved, please take the time to love this place and know an issue before you fix it. This is the best public university anywhere, even though it is not, nor will it ever be perfect. It takes a team together to lead an organization as complex as this one. Chancellor Guskowitz will grow and has the capability to become one of the best chancellors in our history. Our job is and should always be to support and help any chancellor be successful. At Carolina, we must all be transparent and lead with honest, open discourse. Do not kid yourself into thinking that every issue every day is paramount. Seek discussions that matter and do so with folks that have a different opinion. We are all more likely to learn when listening with patience. My parents gave me a wonderful opportunity to be a basketball camper under the care of Coach Dean Smith and Coach Bill Guthridge. There I met a man named Steve Previs, who was a great player here and a really good student here. He befriended me as a 10-year-old camper, and we're close to this day. Basketball camp later led to my being a student manager for Coach Roy Williams when he started as volunteer assistant coach here in 1978. I was also lucky to be running basketball camp operations when I was a senior when I met a fine young camper named Hubert Davis, who's 10. We're blessed to have one of the finest people I have ever met in my life now as the coach for Carolina basketball. And I thank Coach Williams, Bubba Cunningham, the chancellor, and this board for supporting him. And by the way, our non-revenue sports programs are stronger than ever and represent Carolina so well. I could easily go on about the many attributes of this place, but it's important to thank the many dedicated people that have gone before us and made Carolina great. We should always be thankful to both the legislature and the incredibly important private donor support that enables us to be the best public university. 3 outstanding individuals that were also former trustees received honorary degrees today from Carolina. Ann Cates, a wonderful lady, shows what can be done against the odds and how a woman can do anything. She's done it with grace, grit, and selfless leadership. Don Curtis, who's here, is a true example of generosity and commitment to others over self. The Curtis Media Center he and Barbara donated will soon open and will be a treasure for Carolina. Larry Caudle is indicative of what a public university is all about. He's the son of a high school principal from Shelby. He got his chemistry degree here, went on to get his doctorate, and later started a very successful business. He came back to teach here, be a trustee, chair this board, chair the Rams Club, and really importantly, help create the entrepreneurial minors program that's so great at this university. He's a humble man that's given much to many. One common sense statement I would like to make that I think is very important, and that is, if you truly have inclusion, then the issue of diversity and equity are covered. Inclusion is the key. Diversity of thought is part of true inclusion as well, I will state. And once again, I want to state and quote Reverend Bob Seymour, who was a mentor of Coach Smith's, his minister and advisor. And when I asked him, when we talked about Saunders Hall and renaming it Carolina Hall, what Coach Smith might say about renaming buildings, he thought about it and he stated that Coach Smith might say, it matters not what name is above the door. What matters is who is in the door to greet you. Let's all be the smiling face in the doorway here, welcoming all that enter. I'll close by saying thank you, Carolina. Thank you for the opportunity to be a small part of something so important. Sorry. I honestly do love Carolina more every time I'm here, and I'm proud that my wife and all my children have Carolina degrees. Dr. Kizmika Corbett appropriately stated at graduation this past weekend that Carolina is part of your being and is your home for life. She's right. So whether you're a faculty member, a student, administrator, trustee, alum, I ask you all to love Carolina, study it, and be careful not only what you fix, but how you fix it. Thank you. So we're going to start the meeting with the faculty update from Faculty Chair Mimi Chapman. Welcome, Mimi.
Thank you, Trustee Duckett and other members of the board. As always, I thank you for having me today. It's good to be with you. Today, I want to speak to you about the decision to override a faculty recommendation regarding tenure. Before I do that, I want you to know that I spoke with Ms. Hannah Jones yesterday to ask her permission to speak about this issue, knowing that it is linked to personnel information that is hers to speak about. She gave me that permission. Tenure decisions are never made lightly, and I'd like to briefly take you through the amount of faculty time that is devoted to any one tenure decision. First, letters are solicited from faculty members at other universities. Usually between 4 and 6 letters are solicited. Those faculty members at other institutions review a candidate's file and compose a letter outlining strengths and weaknesses. When I do this type of review for other universities, it usually takes me at least 2 full days of work to complete the process. 6 letters times 2 8-hour days equals 16 hours per letter, times 6 letters equals 96 hours of faculty time from faculty members outside of our university. They help us as we help them. Next, the full professors in a school or department review and come together to discuss a candidate. Let's imagine conservatively that there are 10 full professors in a particular department or school. They review the candidate's file, again taking about 3 hours each. 10 professors times 3 hours plus meeting time equals 32 hours. Next, the file goes to the Appointments, Promotions, and Tenure Committee, a 12-member elected committee that meets monthly for 2 to 3 hours. Each file is reviewed by a subcommittee of that 12, and in addition by the whole group. Again, conservatively, 3 hours to review a file, 12 members times 3 hours for one file equals 36 hours. At that point, a final recommendation is made to the provost about tenure for a given candidate. My back of the envelope conservative calculation means that approximately 164 hours of faculty time go into any tenure decision. Divided by 8, that gets us to 20 plus 8-hour days of faculty work for any tenure decision. That excludes the time of the dean or department chair, staff time, and the time of the chancellor and provost. I recognize that it is your right to override a tenure recommendation, and I can even envision instances in which that might be a positive step. For instance, if some set of facts came to light after an extensive faculty review that colors the candidate's fitness, commission of a serious crime, learning that someone's work is plagiarized, or some other set of circumstances, something that was unknown to the faculty when the review was done. In such circumstances, we would all be grateful for you to take the type of action you have taken. But the concerns that are rumored to have been the cause of this particular decision, does this candidate have adequate teaching experience? She's not coming from an academic background, make no sense as a reason to take an action that does such damage to the relationship between the trustees and the faculty. To take this decision is to say to the faculty, intentionally or not, that our expertise, our judgment, our devotion to this institution, and indeed our time is not something that you value. And to receive this message after a year like we have all had, in which we have gone to extraordinary lengths to respond to student needs, keep our research going, keep our own families healthy and whole, is devastating and demoralizing. Most everyone on this campus would have the opportunity to be elsewhere. We could be at a private university with better benefits, better pay, better retirement plans, and the list goes on. Most of us are here because we love this university and all it stands for. We love being of the public and for the public. We love serving students from every corner of the state, indeed the nation and the world. We believe in the mission of the university that this university has to solve big problems, take on challenges that others shy away from. And indeed, one of those challenges is confronting the history, legacies, and enduring proliferation of oppression and racism in this country. We will never be able to put such problems to rest until we wrestle with them honestly. And we need faculty members who speak to us in new ways to shake up our thinking and help us do that. Finally, I want you to know that I speak to you as the great-granddaughter and grandniece of Confederate soldiers. My father, who died this year at 99 years of age, lived with his Grandpa John and loved him deeply. But the victory of Grandpa John's life came not from sweeping difficult truths under the rug and pretending that bygones were bygones. Instead, through his faith, a faith that said, love your neighbor as yourself, and answers the question of who is my neighbor with the return question of who is not, he became a peacemaker and devoted himself to knitting his deeply divided community back together. Healing and indeed light and liberty, lux and libertas, happen through deep listening to those we disagree with, through opening our minds and hearts to history that we don't know or that feels almost too threatening to believe. As faculty, we cherish these conversations. We are not afraid of them. And we know they make our world a better place over time. When we recommend tenure, we do so with a deep conviction that the person being tenured has ideas and works that are life-changing and life-affirming, even if that work and those ideas are controversial or difficult to sit with. As chair of the faculty, I am inviting you to trust us in the exhaustive work that we do to make tenure recommendations. For me, I would choose to be your partner and not your adversary, but partnership requires respect. And at this moment, the faculty is not feeling that. As always, I am happy to speak with you here by phone, or now that I am fully vaccinated, over coffee about any of your concerns or anything you would like to talk about regarding faculty life at UNC. And I do thank you for your kind attention.
Mimi, thank you. And before I open this up to questions, I want to say we've worked as a board for 8 years that I've been here very closely with the faculty. We have not blocked tenure and done different things. And all of a sudden we're being accused of not working with the faculty. You make it a statement that there are principles of shared governance that comes into question when the BOT elects not to follow a faculty recommendation or tenure. Shared governance means people have different responsibilities. And shared governance does not mean that we just have to sit here and rubber stamp everything that comes our way. And that's basically what you're sitting here telling us today. And all I'm asking for is this. This board has never spent time trying to make things difficult for the faculty or anyone else. We're trying to do our job. And when you say things, and this is not the first time, because in my personal opinion, you, as chair of the faculty, also said specifically that students were rushing Franklin Street was a definition of white privilege. These kinds of things are overcharged, oversimplified, and indicative more about making the news than actually leading it. That's my personal opinion. I'll open it up for questions to others. I will sit with you anytime and talk. Mimi, we've done it before, but this board has a role too. And my father was a tenured professor at Wake Forest, taught at Bowman Gray. I understand tenure. I support tenure, but there's a lot going on in statements being made right now. They're not correct. And I'll leave it there and I'll open it up for questions. Seeing none, I thank you, Mimi. Next, we're going to go to a graduate and professional student government update from Ryan Collins. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you, Chair Duckett, and to the members of the Board of Trustees. And thank you, Mimi, for your continued leadership of the faculty. It's been really a privilege working with you this year, and I appreciate all of your support and your advocacy and your leadership on behalf of the university. Before I begin, I do want to express my appreciation to Chair Duckett as well as Trustees Cochran, Hopkins, and Brown for your service to the university as members of the board for the past 8 years. So these will be my final remarks to the Board of Trustees in my capacity representing the graduate and professional student government. I officially transitioned out of office at the beginning of April, but have been diligently working to wrap up a few projects and to support President Neil Swamy, who's on the call today, through the transition. I'm going to formally introduce President Swamy at the end of my remarks, but would like to use the bulk of my time with you today to highlight some of the accomplishments of GPSG over the past year. Of course, a significant and unexpected focus this year has been on navigating the COVID-19 pandemic and ensuring that our graduate and professional students have the support that they need to be successful. In this vein, we very early on issued calls for greater accommodations for students affected by the pandemic, including a relaxing of grading requirements and extensions of time to degree. Early on, we also worked with our counterparts in undergraduate student government and appropriated $50,000 from our student government excess reserves in order to support the COVID-19 Student Impact Fund to provide emergency aid, financial aid to students. We worked with the graduate school as well as our peer institutions to support international students who faced even greater challenges from the pandemic due to travel restrictions, as well as highly restrictive policies implemented by the previous presidential administration. I, along with GPSG Executive Board member and co-chair of the Student Advisory Committee, the Chancellor Mayan Adams, represented graduate and professional students on the Campus and Community Advisory Committee to provide input on planning for the spring semester and beyond. And even though the pandemic was a major factor throughout the year, we did not let that distract us from our other priorities. During the fall semester, our government relations team collaborated with organizations across campus to increase voter engagement in the 2020 election. We created a special fund to support programming for student organizations serving Black, Indigenous, and students of color, as well as other initiatives designed to promote racial equity. We worked with the graduate school and the provost's office to improve resources for faculty who mentor and advise graduate student researchers. We created the first ever graduate and professional student advocacy day at the North Carolina General Assembly, collaborating with peers from across the UNC system to promote the needs of graduate and professional students to our elected representatives. In fact, 3 of my colleagues and I just met with Representative Verla Insco of Orange County on Monday and talked about a variety of issues, including increased financial support for graduate education and representation for the growing graduate and professional student population in the UNC system and governance decisions. We also partnered with the Residence Hall Association to develop a community council for our graduate and professional students living in Beatty Hill apartments, which is a bit of a passion project for mine, given my previous service as RHA president while as an undergraduate at Carolina. Finally, our Future of the GPSF committee worked deliberatively over a period of 6 months to develop a strategic plan for the organization for the next 5 years, one that had resulted in a substantial reorganization of our governance structure to better serve the needs of our constituents. As I promised in my previous remarks, I've shared this committee's report with Chair Stevens and asked that he pass it along to the rest of the board members for your review. You'll also notice that I've been using the name Graduate and Professional Student Government, which is a major change that our constituents approved in a referendum back in February and that officially took effect on April 7th. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, but I hope that it does give you a sense of the great work our leadership has been conducting over the course of this very challenging year. I'm excited for the progress GPSG has made and its potential moving forward as it continues to advocate on behalf of the nearly 11,000 graduate and professional students at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Leading this effort next year will be Neil Swami, a dual degree candidate in the Doctor of Pharmacy and Master of Public Health programs. Neil's previous roles with GPSG have included Director of Diversity and Inclusion and Director of Student Affairs. He is a passionate and dedicated leader who cares deeply about the issues affecting his fellow students, and I'm confident he will provide outstanding leadership for the organization. Before I close, I hope you'll indulge me for just a moment longer to share something from my scholarship this semester. For my term paper in a class on the North Carolina Constitution, I wrote about the constitutional and statutory history of the University of North Carolina. I'd like to quote from the preamble to our founding charter, dated November 2nd, 1789. Quote, "Whereas in all regulated governments, it is the indispensable duty of every legislature to consult the happiness of a rising generation and to endeavor to fit them for an honorable discharge of the social duties of life by paying the strictest attention to their education. And whereas a university supported by permanent funds and well endowed would have the most direct tendency to establish the above purpose." End quote. So as I prepare to leave both GPSG and UNC, I leave with the hope that it will continue supporting future generations of students, including those who at the time of this charter would have been left out of that promise, and preparing them for successful lives. Thank you all for your time today and for your support over the course of this year. It's been an honor.
Ryan, thank you. What are your plans from here?
Well, I'm preparing to studying for the bar right now. I'll be taking that at the end of July in North Carolina. Job search is still ongoing, but I will be happy to let you know once I get that figured out.
We wish you the best, and I love the fact that you quoted the university charter. It's amazing, and we should look at it more often. All of us. There's a great place to do that, and that's right at the fireplace in Hyde Hall. It's beautiful. So thank you for your service to the university and to others.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have the employee forum update from Shayna Hill. Welcome, Shayna.
Thank you. Good afternoon, UNC family. I bring you updates from staff across campus and from the delegates of the UNC Employee Forum. The UNC Employee Forum was established in 1992 to serve as an advisory body to the chancellor and to his or her designees. For almost 30 years, the forum has played a vital role in our system of shared governance, often helping tackle difficult challenges facing our campus community. In addition, the forum also manages some extremely important programs. We award several educational scholarships per year through the Carolina Family Scholarship Fund, allowing children of UNC employees to receive funds for college or other educational opportunities. We award funds through the Professional Development Grant Program to UNC staff so that they can pursue development opportunities that might not otherwise be available to them. We assist the Carolina Community Garden, which provides thousands of pounds of fresh produce to some of our lowest paid employees across campus each year. And we manage the Carolina Blood Drive, which I am happy to report holds the distinction of being the largest blood drive held in the United States since the pandemic started in 2020. But one purpose the forum serves that is not often pointed out is that it provides leadership opportunities to staff from all job classifications across campus. Every committee we have is led by a committee chair. Every division is led by a division leader. And there are several officer positions that make up the executive committee. The forum provides leadership opportunities to a truly diverse population of UNC staff, not just to staff who hold higher or terminal degrees. And this ensures that the challenges faced by every level of employee working at Carolina have a forum for discussion. Over the last 4 years, I have had the immense honor of serving the forum as its chair. We have worked through many challenging issues together during some of the most difficult circumstances. I've served on searches and campus level committees with many of you, and I have become a better person because of it. And as I reflect on this, I remember my mother, a single parent left widowed by the suicide of my father. heading off in the evenings after working her day job to come to the UNC campus to pursue a PhD in education so that she could lift us out of poverty and provide a better life for us. She knew education was everything. And being able to serve the university that provided us an absolute lifeline as I was growing up is the biggest gift I could ever have received. I sincerely thank you for allowing me this amazing opportunity.
Behalf of so many people, but certainly this board, you know, you're a Carolina gem, and we thank you. You have been great at your job and helping others, and you do so much for others, and I can't thank you enough. Anybody have any questions or comments for Shana? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
One thing I want to do before we get into the admissions and enrollment update, and it's my oversight, and I apologize, but Lamar, I want to welcome Lamar Richards, the new student body president, to our board, for all the work that you're going to be doing for others and everything else. I admire you because
Trustee
there's a
Duckett,
lot to it. Yes.
Trustee Duckett, I think Trustee Hopkins wanted to make a comment first.
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Sorry, I was a bit delayed there. I'm so far down here. Anyways, I just wanted to say, Shana, thank you for your leadership. It's been a pleasure to get to know you and your staff and all that they do for our university. Thank you so much for your leadership. And then I'll also, since I'm saying thanks, since we've moved on, I just want to say thank you to Ryan. I think it's been a great partnership. I think that the GPSF, but GPSF split that transition that we made years ago was a perfect representation of how this university can work together to excel. And when we made that decision, it was around principles of critical thinking and research. And I hope that all decisions that we make in this great university, that we continue to let those be our guiding principles. Emotion can be difficult and step in the way, but if we stick to our principles that make us great, and that is the critical thinking and the research, we can overcome much. So thank you all.
Thank you, Trustee Hopkins. So next I'm going to call up Interim Vice Provost for Enrollment, Rachel Feldman, to present the admissions and enrollment update. Welcome, Rachel.
In enrollment, we do everything very collaboratively. So I brought a couple colleagues to help me out with this presentation. We have a few topics to cover. I think we're going to give you some pretty good news about our upcoming fall class. Then we're going to talk about the working group that the chancellor charged with looking at undergraduate enrollment growth over the next few years. And then we're going to talk a little bit about scholarships and attracting the best and the brightest to Carolina. So I'd like to start by introducing Allison Legge, our interim director of undergraduate admissions. Probably a lot of you are already familiar with her. Thank you, John. And Michael Davis, our associate director of undergraduate admissions in charge of recruitment. And in fact, I am going to turn it right over. TJ, if you have the slides. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Allison to kick off the slides because first we're going to talk about our new fall 2021 Tar Heels. And as Trustee Duckett already mentioned, lots of people from all over are very interested in joining us here at Carolina.
Thank you. The slides are up? Oh, sorry. Well, I'll just start and say I am truly honored to be here to share this preliminary view of our incoming first year class. Next slide, please. Okay. Perfect, thank you. So this is all preliminary. It has been an exceptional year. We received almost 54,000 applications. which is 9,300 more applications than we had last year, or a 21% increase. So what does that mean for us when making admissions decisions and enrolling and building a wonderful class? So if you look at our numbers, you can see, starting with North Carolina, we admitted 75 more North Carolinians, and we ended up yielding an additional 19. We actually admitted 42 fewer non-residents and ended up enrolling 200 additional out-of-state students, which is a 5.1% increase, which is absolutely unexpected. And again, these are preliminary numbers, and these are our numbers for this May compared to last May. And if you go to the next slide, please. What makes these numbers so astounding to us is if you look at our trends. So over the past 10 years, you could look at our North Carolina line and you could see it's essentially flat, small changes over time. But then if you look at our out-of-state yield, you can see we have been going down for the last several years until you see this year, and there's that sudden spike. So what does that mean for us moving forward? Next slide, please. So we're going to very, very closely monitor our cancellations. We have several indicators that we're going to see a significant summer melt. For one thing, we're hearing that peer institutions are also seeing this sudden, unexpected spike in their out-of-state enrollment. Families are telling us they're coming to orientation and they're telling us, oh, well, we've deposited at multiple institutions because we want to see what's going to happen with the pandemic. So that's important for us to just keep an eye on. The other thing is we're actively promoting summer school for our incoming students, and that will be important for them so that they could get a head start on their required courses. Most of all, we are really excited and looking forward to welcoming another outstanding class of students who are thrilled to be Tar Heels. As President Hans said this weekend at commencement, he said, you know, this is an extraordinary time and there's no better moment for new beginnings. So I thank you and I look forward to giving you updates over the next several months.
Thank you so much, Allison. So that was a little more growth than we had actually expected this year, a little more than our plan. We still need to see where it shakes out, and a few more non-residents than generally we can fit in, but these are amazing students, and so if we're going to have a problem by having a few extra, I think we're going to be proud to have these students as Tar Heels.
Mr. Chairman, one quick question for you. Does that extra 200 out-of-state students bump up against the 18% cap?
It sure does. Yeah. Luckily, we've been under the cap for several years in a row, and we would need to be over the cap a couple years in a row to get any financial penalty from the system. But that is one of the reasons we're keeping a really close eye on these rumors that students are double and triple depositing and hoping maybe that number comes a little down closer to where we need to be in the end. These are very preliminary numbers, just May over May, and we see most of our melt of students, as we call it, if they don't show up during June and July.
And I think, Rachel, you said that it's more likely that melt will occur at a higher percentage in the out-of-state pool.
I believe that's correct. It is a pandemic year, and so no one is really sure what's happening, but this is a trend at other elite publics and other AAU schools that the out-of-state students seem to be the higher population. So we're not in it alone. Other schools aren't taking students off the wait list because they're over-enrolled, and you know, we're just going to have to see how it plays out, but I expect that to be true. Okay, well, I'll move on to topic 2, which is our wonderful enrollment growth working group, where we had wonderful representation from around the campus and one of our trustees. Thank you, Chair Duckett. The Chancellor charged us with really thinking about smart growth. So, of course, thinking about revenue, but also maintaining our diversity and the quality of our student body, thinking about demand for majors into the future, and of course, maintaining our reputation and making sure students have a great experience. We came up with a few principles for growth. I think these are all going to be pretty familiar to you, especially around Carolina Next and being sustainable, but we really did focus on a lot of what did it mean to maintain the brand of Carolina and the experience students would have of being a Tar Heel, making sure we didn't do anything to damage that, and of course, hope to enhance it. Of course, we ran into some constraints, and these are probably even more familiar to all of you because of your service on this committee. You know, some of the things are more obvious, like physical space or the scalability of student supports. But we've been really excited about our new general education curriculum ideas in action. And as that moves in, it's really foundational, the first year coursework that students have, courses in common and with pretty small class sizes. So I just wanted to point it out because you will see that really inform a lot of the recommendations that are coming up. I also just wanted to point out that, again, as Chair Duckett pointed out to us, there has been a significant growth over the last couple of decades. And I think sometimes it can feel like there's not a lot of growth because it's been sort of slow and steady. But actually, our undergraduate degree seeking students, we've grown 25%, more than 25% in the last 2 decades. And overall, we've grown about 18%. The only category of students we've seen actually not grow is our non-degree seeking undergraduates. So that's kind of just interesting to know that we're building already on a steady pattern of growth. So here are our recommendations about how to approach this. We really want to attract students who will add to Carolina and who will benefit from being an undergraduate Tar Heel. But those that really maybe don't need to take advantage of those first year courses. So we really thought we should concentrate on growing where students already have an associate's degree. So that could be North Carolina early college students. So students who were dual enrolled in a high school and community college and have earned an associate's degree while they are in high school. Very often top-notch students. Or transfer students from the community college system, building a stronger pipeline there. We also think we could pull in a few more global students to ensure everybody has a great global experience. And we're really excited about our Carolina Global Launch Program, where students will start their experience abroad and then transfer in their second semester and then make up some of that coursework during the following summer. We wanted to pilot that program last year. We couldn't for some obvious reasons, but this year we have nearly 100 students who are excited about starting their experience that way, and we can't wait to see how that goes. And then we're also thinking about direct transfer programs to high demand majors and professional schools. And finally, we think something that would be very exciting for some top students are some joint undergraduate graduate degree programs that they could complete both an undergraduate degree and a master's degree in 5 years. That also has the benefit of having students take more graduate coursework, which is great for them and great for us financially under the state allocation model that if you have questions about, I will point at my colleague, Nate Knuffman, to answer. It's very complicated. We also, separate from overall enrollment growth, would recommend growing summer school into a larger program for our own students, including online offerings, which again, we think students could take advantage of even if they choose to go home over the summer. It could get them ahead and it would be a good revenue stream for us, all win-win. So here are the rather
Rachel.
modest, oh, I'm
Yeah,
so sorry.
Just a
Jeff.
quick question, since
Yeah, Trustee Brown.
the recommendations page is pretty important. A couple of things. When you mentioned the online options, from what I heard, you said online in the context of sort of tag teaming. What about, I mean, I just want to know, and I'm not giving a judgment call on this. What about online programs self-contained as opposed to encouraging them with summer school or transfers? Where did you come out on those issues?
Yeah, we didn't explore too much a 4-year online program. I think partially because we just hadn't gone down the path of what would that mean to be a Tar Heel if you never set foot on campus. So
Or hybrids for that matter.
Yeah, so I think we were interested in exploring hybrid options for students where they could take some online coursework and then be on campus sometimes. I think summer was a good place to start because students often have somewhere else they'd like to be. and see how that goes. And last summer, if you remember, we had record enrollment in summer, I think partially because students didn't have a lot of other options for internships and things, but partially because we offered really popular courses remotely. And then the transfer programs, the thought was that students could find a way into these high demand majors where right now we have to turn students away or where there's just not enough space directly, and that it's easier to create space for them by going online and not needing to find physical capacity, dining at lunchtime, housing in the area, all those things. And none of these recommendations cut out other things. So for instance, our Carolina Away program has been a really successful way for students to begin their program remotely, and then we hope come in person. We might explore that as well. The committee just didn't land there.
One other quick question, if I may. There are commentators out there who are describing the possible need for undergraduate education to move to a little bit more of a older model. Students that aren't coming in right out of high school, maybe, as you say, community college transfers, military transfers, others who have independent experiences before they come into the university setting. It sounds like some of this is getting at that, but I'd be interested in that element and how that plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. One of our recommendations is really to strengthen that pipeline between the community college system and Carolina and welcome more transfer students in. I think we're already seeing that just looking at our admissions pool, we have a wider range of students coming and interested in coming. I bet we'll tell you more about that in the fall when we do the class profile, but certainly all those things were on our mind.
When you say a wider range, meaning?
Meaning different ages, veteran status, all different life experiences.
Okay, thank you.
So fewer students that are just straight out of high school, although that pool is still extremely strong. Okay. These are the numbers. They're a little bit modest. We think that's right. If we move too quickly, again, we're worried that students won't have a good experience and then they won't think well of us or graduate quickly or do all the things, and we won't have a chance to build our infrastructure. But over time, you can see this is an extra maybe 400 to 700 students per class here at Carolina. Some segment of them, particularly this degree completion column, would be fully online though, so they wouldn't be taking up physical infrastructure, although we would welcome them in other ways.
I have a question. With the Carolina Global Launch, what kind of orientation do students get once they come back on campus so they can really feel like they're a Tar Heel?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually one of the reasons that we wanted to start the Global Launch program was to make sure that those students had a real cohort. So they will get orientation before they even travel abroad, and then they do all kinds of activities while they're at one of 3 programs that we contract with. So it's not like they can just go anywhere. They're in a program, they do service together, they come back as a cohort, and they get an orientation at Carolina. So we're trying to be really intentional, and we're trying to make sure that works, in part to see if we can really build a welcoming spring start in general, to see if that's a place we can grow as well. You know, the last thing we want to do is let students in and then sort of drop them into the sea, even if it's a sea of Carolina blue.
Chairman Duckett?
Yes, go ahead, John.
I was listening to you earlier talk about the great people at this university who work hard every day, who love this university. And I can't think of a group in the university that works harder under more pressure-packed deadlines and timelines than you all. And I just want you to know how much we appreciate it and what a difficult job it is and how you do it and the way that you do it. And not everybody gets in, but you all give answers to everybody in a way that is timely, and it is much appreciated by all of us. So thank you.
Thank you. It's a great team in admissions.
Gene, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks. I know I'm not a member of your committee, but thank you for allowing me to speak. I wanted to just thank y'all. It was a surprise to all of us when Steve Farmer announced that he was going to leave, and that in and of itself would have made it a crazy year, right? What an extraordinary job he did all those many years. Layer on top of that, the pandemic, and I can only imagine how difficult it has been for all of you. And I'm so grateful for the important work that you did. I absolutely echo what Trustee Pryor said. I know that having to hit targets and achieve balance is not easy, but y'all do it with grace and you make it look easy. So I'm so impressed with all of your hard work during this period of uncertainty. And you've maintained an incredible class. I mean, this is just an extraordinary job that you've done. So I'm very, very grateful. It's a great problem to have. So many people that want to come to Carolina, right? It's a real blessing to have that problem. And I know it's a lot of extra work for y'all, but thank you for all you do to navigate it. You do it beautifully.
Thank you so
Chairman.
much, Trustee.
Thank you, Gene. Thanks. Any other, Monroe?
I would reiterate what Gene said, and thank you for all the work you've done. I was just curious, what is the deposit that a student would have to make to create the option to come?
$250.
Pretty cheap option.
Thoughts or comments from anybody else?
I do have a question. Thank you, and echo all the thanks from everybody else. But I did want to know, what is the role that the gap year students are going to, how will that impact enrollment in the future?
The regular gap year students, the global gap year program, or you're worried that more students took a gap year last year?
I have heard of several students that are taking gap years this year. So I'm curious to know how that will influence enrollment possibly next year, or how you account for that.
You know, that's a good question. We saw a slight increase in the number of our students who chose a gap year, but not an enormous one. And they were in our planning for the following year. So we always know how many there are and then can sort of predict how many can come from the students who defer. But we only saw a very slight uptick here at Carolina. So again, maybe we're still the place to be, or maybe there just aren't a ton of options.
Thank you.
Yeah, and similar with the sophomore guarantee students, you know, we know who they are and they count them into the model. There are a lot of spreadsheets.
Ralph?
Thank you, Chair Duckett. My only question pertains to the statistics and the preliminary numbers for May. Do you have numbers showing whether we've made any progress with minority improvement numbers, and also male-female numbers? Do we have any preliminary information on that?
We don't have those yet, but we'll present them in the fall when we have our class profile.
Other questions or comments? Thank you so much. I've had the ability since I was on Board of Visitors back in 1996 to work with admissions on a number of projects, and that back then it was still in-state and out-of-state cap and tuition and all kinds of things when Jerry Lucido was running it. So thank you for getting us through an incredible year, like the people have stated and like John stated appropriately. Y'all do it with grace, and that matters. So thank you.
Thank you. We have one more presentation. Okay. Oh, I shouldn't step on the microphone. Uh-oh. Oh, okay. Thank you. So this next part, shifting gears, we wanted to talk about the role of enrollment broader than admissions, and we wanted to talk about using scholarships to recruit the best students here to Carolina and what role that plays in the broader university. And once again, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague to kick us off. Michael Davis, would you like to talk about sort of what we read for and how we choose students?
Wonderful. Thank you, Rachel. And I first just want to echo both Rachel and Allison and just thank you for the time and the opportunity to speak with y'all today. We're incredibly grateful for the opportunity and incredibly grateful for your support as we work to bring in amazing students every year to this university. So within enrollment, we very much view our role as building the community here at Carolina. We look to recruit, to admit, to enroll a smart, caring, diverse group of students who are going to foster excellence here at Carolina. We're also looking for students that are going to make each other better and really help the university achieve its mission. We do look, when we're reviewing students, we look at over 40 criteria, and some of them are here on the screen behind me. And we look at students individually, comprehensively, and holistically. We're really trying to think about their academic, their extracurricular accomplishments and potential, as well as the context in which they achieved those accomplishments and that potential has been forged. When we're looking at students, we are also considering them for scholarships and special opportunities. And we know that the students that possess these types of qualities, in addition to their stellar academic achievements, are exactly the type of students that Carolina wants in its community. Excellent. Scholarships are certainly one of the most valuable tools that we have to recruit incredible young people to this institution. Over the last several years, and a huge thank you to Rachel for her vision in this, and really thinking about how we align our scholarships with the university's strategic goals. As we've done that, we have been able to enroll successively more academically strong and diverse cohorts every year. We're also very blessed here at Carolina that we have a range of scholarships, and we do tend to put them into categories as we're thinking about them. But I want to be very clear that none of these categories are mutually exclusive. I also very much do not want to set up a false dichotomy between things like academics and need, or talent and need. The reality is that every student that earns their place here at Carolina is meritorious, and that is especially true for those young people that we're able to give scholarships to. When I think about the landscape of scholarships, the proverb, "it takes a village," comes to mind. We have the opportunity to work certainly with our colleagues in the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid, who manage over 1,200 scholarships. We also have the chance to work with academic departments across campus, those running the Chancellor Science Scholars Program, or the Keenan Music, or the Thomas Wolfe for Creative Writing. We also have the chance to work with Moorhead, Kane, and Robertson, our external foundations. And each year we partner with all of them to really be intentional about our recruitment and our selection processes so that we're not competing with each other and we're really providing the best experience for students as they're considering Carolina. So again, thank you, and I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel to talk more about our investment and assessment of scholarships.
So we also thought you'd be interested in just a little bit of numbers because, you know, I love spreadsheets. So this is the amount that we spend centrally just out of endowments and gifts, not from tuition, not the Carolina Covenant, not athletic scholarships, and not the outside scholarships, on students each year. And, you know, it sounds like it's going to be more given David Ruth's update in the last committee meeting. We hope so, but we've worked hard to maximize the use of every endowment we have to hope to spend it down every year, all the income on these scholarships. And how are we doing? As Michael mentioned, every year our class gets stronger, and you can see in the last 2 decades, we've made significant progress. This just reflects our North Carolina students, but our out-of-state students are also very strong. So 2 decades ago, about 1/3 of North Carolina students who enrolled here as undergraduates were either in the top 3% of their class or got a top test score. We're now at more than half of the students being in that space. So we have significantly improved the academic quality of our undergraduate class. We also do really well recruiting students who get significant scholarships. You can see this number on Moorhead Kane winners, finalists, and semifinalists all combined is nearly 60% yield compared to our overall yield of 42.5%. And our university scholarship winners are nearly as high at 55%. And I can tell you at the last institution I worked for, which was a similarly elite public, we were happy if our top scholarship yields matched our overall yield. Usually those numbers were worse. So that says something really great about what we're doing to recruit and how much people want to come to Carolina, even when they have great other offers and they're the students we want to recruit most. These are the types of schools that students that are offered a scholarship and choose not to come go to. We want these students too, of course, but these same schools are making offers to the students who do come. And if you add in the higher ranked or highly ranked public schools, that represents 90% of the students that we lose that we offer a full scholarship to. So we're in very good company here. That doesn't mean we don't want to recruit more of those students or we can't be doing more. I just wanted to be clear that, we should also be proud of what we are doing and the university you have all helped us build. So where we could use your advice and help, and I promise this is my last slide, students are really interested by our surveys and opportunities for getting connected to what they are going to do post-graduation. So any way you can help us identify opportunities for internships or experience or ways to prepare them for graduate school or the workplace after would be great. If you could help us think about expanding our partnerships with external foundations to do more holistic recruitment to Carolina based on the entire experience of the university. And then, of course, we always need David Ruth's team's help raising additional funds for all kinds of scholarships, but particularly ones with some flexibilities and maybe opportunities for the experiences students want. I will stop there and we will all take your questions.
Jeff.
Rachel, first, I wanted to thank you and Trustee Duckett, the Chancellor, I think David, Amy, others participate along with Honors Carolina, as well as the head of Morehead Kane and the Robertson in a discussion 5 or 6 weeks ago and on this topic. And I know we don't have more time with the committee meeting, but I think I felt like it was a very positive exchange on this very topic. And I see a lot of good data that's coming through the presentation today on that. I do think, David, one of the things we talked about is that the timeliness as we continue through the rest of the campaign of trying to find ways of greater coordination, perhaps with Honors Carolina and their scholarship program, greater coordination of timing. I noted one of your slides talks about the number of individuals who did not receive the Morehead Kane or any scholarship money who were finalists for Morehead Kane. A lot of that, it sounds like, is timing issues where Morehead Kane is later in the process and therefore we're not able to evaluate some of the finalists to receive dollars. So I really encourage that this can continue. I think you're right. I think we're doing a very credible, if not good job, and maybe very good job. I think there is some hesitations of being a little bit among Honors Carolina as to how we're doing attracting out-of-state students. So I applaud the work, and I'm like others, the tireless work y'all bring, but I think we can continue sharpening our saw on this. And I look forward to hopefully being a part of some of those discussions. So thank you.
Sounds good. We'll keep working on it.
Great comments, Jeff. Thank you.
Sure, I have a quick question. I'm also, interested in follow-up on some additional information on minority breakdown. I think for Trustee Meekins, you were going to provide some additional information on how those numbers are coming in just for admissions. As it relates to scholarships, I would also be interested in that, just to see, what is a financial gap that we may be losing people at, or is it that a lot of the same schools are going after the same, top minority students, but particularly for Black males, I'd be interested in seeing what are some of the numbers that we have if it is a financial issue involved.
Sure, we could get you some data about breakdown. I mean, it can be difficult to get to the root of the decision of the student. I will say when surveyed, most students don't point to the scholarship as the reason they chose another school. You can see they more point to a particular program or preparation for the career they want, but it's still a very worthy thing to look at, and I think we can get you some data.
We've got to get moving. I want to thank you, but I also want to thank Bill Keys, who happens to be sitting here, former trustee that helped. We worked hard, but he did most of the carrying the load of the male minority recruitment initiative that we had a few years ago, and it was successful. And I worked on it for 4 years in a row, calling and kind of taking pride, and did my group beat the other groups, but I haven't gotten that call in a while. And we'd still, I think any trustee would like to be a part of and willing to make a few calls, because it's important to these families and these kids to get a call that we want you here. And that sometimes is the difference maker. But so I would encourage that, and I won't be on this board, I'm still happy to help, but engage everybody on this board to bring the best here that we need to come to this university. And the answer, Teresa, your piece is yes, there is some dramatic competition from especially privates that have more scholarship money. But we need to just keep working on this, and I'm proud of what we're doing. So let me just end it with that, and I thank you for coming. Thank you. Teresa, if you would, can I get a motion to go into closed session?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the University Affairs Committee go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11, subsection A, subsection 1, to prevent the disclosure of privileged information under Section 126-22, and also pursuant to Section 143-318.11, subsection A, subsection 5, and subsection A, subsection 6.
Let me know when we're ready, Rob.
We are up.
Okay, Chuck, we're ready to adjourn.
Okay, we have finished our business and closed, and seeing that there's no further business to come before this committee, so I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Mr.
Sorry,
Chairman,
hang on
before
one
we
second.
adjourn, trustees, I would like to ask if we could just have your attention for a minute.
Kelly, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Trustees, before you depart, Jeff, thanks. I just wanted to take a minute to thank Trustee Duckett for his time, his leadership, many years of this, and every year it's stronger. So I just want to honor you and thank you for your dedication to this university and to lead this committee for 8 years.
Thank you, Kelly. That means a lot to me. Now, if there's no further business, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
In a second? I'll second it. All in favor, aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.
I'll get you something, I just haven't done it yet. I just don't know.
Good presentation.
Oh, thank you. Because I can do it once we get started. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Can you mute all the mics, please?
Okay, I'm ready. We're good.
All right. Very good. Want to go ahead and call the External Relations Committee meeting to order. We are behind pretty significantly, so we'll jump right into business, and we will begin with a communications update by Vice Chancellor Curran. Mr. Vice Chancellor.
Thank you, Chair Davis. I don't know if this thing goes up or not, but I'll do this. Thank you, Chair Davis. I really appreciate the opportunity to brief you today, and I want to extend a warm welcome to Trustee Richards. It's great to have you on this committee and part of this. Today it's my privilege to share the communications supporting the 2021 commencement. It was truly a unique and historic event. We wanted to capture the indefatigable spirit of our students and faculty and staff, and we wanted to do that in a unique storytelling way. We also had a rare opportunity with two of the leading COVID scientists as our keynote speakers, as well as an opportunity to do a commencement we've never done before, which was largely built on storytelling because of the largely virtual nature of the presentations. And also a chance to do something that would create a sense of community at commencement, despite the fact that our students were sitting physically distanced and obviously doing things over 5 different commencements was unique. But we found a way to bring people together, and we were really excited about that. We had a lot of logistics and hurdles to overcome. For instance, Rob Holliday needed to get to Washington, D.C. to film Dr. Corbett. That required some on-site logistics and negotiations and workarounds, and he did a brilliant job of that. And then ultimately, as we would go through each of these commencements, trying to make sure that the people following those commencements would get a sense of a unique experience, something that was special for their student, so that they would feel that they were duly celebrated for their accomplishments. And we did so with a great deal of help from UNC Events, who did a spectacular job organizing this. Ron Strauss and his committee. UNC TV produced this and did a wonderful job. Great collaborative spirit. So let me go ahead and just share with you some numbers. And TJ, if you would. So, we love data. And one of the things I wanted to share with you is, this was as unprecedented as it was. This was some of the richest storytelling we've been able to produce around a commencement. And I really commend my team for rising to the challenge of, working virtually and also being out and producing these wonderful pieces of content. 6 videos that were produced, not including those that were live streamed. We had 12 big content stories that were all written. Of course, 123 social media posts. We had 10,200 live stream videos, 204 gallery-worthy candid photos, and all accounting to about a little over 2 million social media impressions. And I'll get into other numbers in a second, but those are pretty big numbers for us. And as a reminder, we had about 6,300 going through commencement. So it was something important to each and every one of them. And we wanted to make sure that their families and friends got a sense of the celebration. TJ? In celebrating the class, and as we did that, we really wanted to capture the spirit and the joy. And if you haven't been to the unc.edu site or looked at our social media, I would encourage you to do so. It's still curated up there. It's wonderful content. I'm going to share some of that with you today. But this just gives you a sense of the euphoria and joy. And the irony of it is, because of the physical distancing between our students, you really got a greater sense of the individual stories that were being told as the students themselves were expressing that joy with photos and selfies and things with their friends. Emily, if you would. So let's start with some social media breakdown. Our top 3 were very special posts that talked about, for instance, Dr. Corbett's homecoming of sorts, back to campus, back to the region where she grew up. And that story generated over 150,000 impressions, 19,000 unique video views, et cetera. And you see these other pieces of content across Instagram and Facebook. We continued to populate all of our platforms with content for the 10 days leading up to that. And all in all, that generated 3,000 total live streams, 20,000 total views. The views on Carolina social channels were over 170,000. And the total views on the commencement content, social channels plus YouTube, were nearly 200,000. So these are really big numbers for us, even at commencement. And I think, again, the unique nature of this and sort of the pent-up interest helped drive a lot of that as well. TJ, if you would. With media relations, this was another big opportunity. Naturally, as a flagship, many people do come to us for commencement stories, so national press as well as all of our locals. And, this year was very different in the Triangle, for instance. We definitely had a different type of cadence. Duke went 2 weeks ahead of us. NC State was a day ahead of us. And so we had a lot of competition in the media space for commencement stories. But we did have Dr. Fauci, we did have Dr. Corbett, we had pre-recorded their speeches, we did have some content that we could send out to media with their permission in advance. And that really helped us plant stories ahead of time. We also did a special story with Kevin and Stacey Harris from our events team, previewing for WTVD and our local audience what was going to happen at commencement. And that really helped drive a lot of interest. All in all, our media relations alone drove nearly 27 million media impressions. All of these stories are built around our student success and achievement, faculty, et cetera. It was a great moment for the Carolina brand and for our students and faculty and our staff who worked so hard to put commencement together. If you would, please, the next slide. We also took an opportunity that we'd not had before by combining new technology available to us at UNC Creative to create digital publishing that is highly engaging, very interactive. And with the unique nature of this commencement, we had to have a low-touch commencement. We decided we could not hand out a lot of items. So one of the items that we could not distribute was a commencement program, which you may recall from your own commencement as a keepsake, not just for you, but for your family. It lists all the different traditions, the graduate names, et cetera. So we took advantage of this and used a new technology that we were using through UNC Creative called Folio, and we produced the commencement program in an online format that you could use on your phone. You could engage with it on a phone or a tablet or whatever you have. You could do that at home if you were following along. We never have been able to get programs to people at home. And this not only gave all of our graduates and their family and friends the program in the palm of their hand in an interactive way to get more information, it also saved us some printing costs. So if you think about a program, obviously a lot of those items are produced and then left underneath a chair at the end of commencement. This year, we were able to save approximately $30,000 in printing costs and roughly $5,000 in additional creative costs. And that is something that we believe is a really positive outcome on top of all this other great content from a financial standpoint. And we will continue to look for ways to do those in the future. My final piece is I just want to share with you a video, one of many, as I mentioned, that was produced for commencement. This was at the end of commencement. We always produce a reel looking back. TJ, if you would. We always produce a reel that goes backwards and looks at the whole commencement and the celebratory nature and just the euphoria of our students. And you may not have caught this on unc.edu, and I wanted to share it with you now.
Whether you're joining us from your hometown in North Carolina or in a distant city across the world, each one of you is a different person today than the person who came to Carolina years ago. You have defeated the obstacles, overcome the Let's Whether you're joining us from your hometown in North Carolina or in a distant city across the world, each one of you is a different person today than the person who came to Carolina years ago. You have defeated the obstacles, overcome the odds, and made it. So today, let's celebrate you, Carolina's class of 2021.
You are graduating from an extraordinary institution. The young men and women of the University of North Carolina are the future leaders of our society.
Congratulations. You did it. You did it boldly. You did it fearlessly. You did it intelligently. And the prize of it all is that you did it in a pandemic.
I am privileged to lead you in the turning of your tassel. 1, 2, 3. Congratulations.
You, the class of 2021, have accomplished something really hard. And along with your faculty, your families, and your friends, we are so lucky to have been on this journey with you. We celebrate what you've accomplished, and we're excited about your future.
All right, thank you very much, TJ and Emily. Chair, that's my report. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have one question.
Yes.
Chairman. Yeah,
Trustee Bullock.
Vice Chancellor Curran, just to throw in this out there, maybe as future research about the program and it being a keepsake, has your team thought about creating maybe in the future an NFT the non-fungible token that's on the blockchain, you know, that where people, I guess that's a digital unique signature. That might be something to consider
Okay,
down the road.
thank you.
Just
I-
throwing that out there as a
Good.
lob.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Vice Chancellor, as always, your team and you do a fantastic job. Thank you very much for all you do for the university.
Thank you.
We'll next shift to the public affairs update. Vice Chancellor Clayton Summers.
Thank you, Chairman Davis. It's always a pleasure to be in front of you. And you would think after the last few meetings, I would learn to get rid of this stand-up comedian's microphone, have a podium up here. So it's only fitting that I have to suffer through it like everyone else did. Just real quickly to start out, I wanted to amplify what the Chancellor was saying earlier during the finance meeting about the business school. We got a little bit of a technicality there towards the end. I'm sorry for any confusion, but let's not diminish the enthusiasm of our donors and the General Assembly. To get a building funded in the state, you typically have maybe 2 or 3 steps in the process. Step one is, and the business school is a great example of this, is you get some planning money from General Assembly. It could be $500,000, $1 million, and they got that a few years ago. Then you get the next step, which is you actually get a project number in the SCIF, or the State Capital Infrastructure Fund. And so both the business school and the nursing school both got a project code in the SCIF. So that kind of puts you on deck to be funded. And it's a little more than an IOU. It's a little less than a commitment. But what it says is the state has now invested significant funds in planning. The business school got $7 million, then the nursing school got $2.5 million. It's a significant step for the state. They don't like to waste money. And so it's really more of an issue of timing and technicalities. I think Nate was trying to say that, but the point is the General Assembly and our donors have been incredibly enthusiastic about this project. The business school was a year early on their part, which is to raise $75 million. And that, I promise you, will not go unnoticed in Raleigh. So whether it gets funded this year, next year, the year after that, we don't know. It's largely a function of timing, but it is a very important project. The Chancellor has been very steadfast in his leadership of that project for that and the nursing school. So I didn't want anybody to take away this is a maybe. This will happen. It's a matter of timing. So thank you for all the donors and everyone else that's worked on that. Last week, the General Assembly got through what's called the crossover week, which is their halftime of their 2-year session, meaning a bill's got to pass one of the House or the other, or chamber or the other, in order to be considered during the rest of the session. So unlike many years, there were no late nights. There were not discussions about monkeys and all kind of crazy things that happen at 2 o'clock in the morning. But it was a very well thought out schedule. So a lot of bills got passed. There's really nothing now to really update you on in a substantive manner. We'll get to that later, but just know they're working very hard. So now what we do is turn towards the budget focus. At 2:15 this afternoon, this serves me for checking my email during the meetings, but Governor Cooper rolled out his plan for the $5.7 billion the state got for the federal funds. And so he has set out his vision for what that would be. It's a proposal to the legislature. They will incorporate that into their budget process. But notable, he did recommend $350 million for what's called the North Carolina Guarantee Scholarship, which provide students with families that make $60,000 or less, at least $6,000 to go to a UNC system school or a community college. Slightly lesser amount for a private school. But clearly the governor is demonstrating leadership in favoring higher education and what it does for our state. So more to follow on that, but I wanted you to know that did come out this afternoon. Budget-wise, you'll see the Senate come out in the next couple of weeks with their budget. The House will then come out with theirs a couple of weeks after that. Discussions are already going on behind the scenes right now, but you'll start to see some real movement probably in early to mid-June. I do remain optimistic that we'll see a budget that is signed by the governor this year. There have been several indications of some more positive working relationships. So I am very hopeful that we'll get there. Stay tuned on that, but you should look for, a positive sign would be a budget that comes out of the House and Senate sometime in the middle of June, maybe late June, but just watch the votes and see, is it a bipartisan vote? Is it strongly supported? And that'll give you a pretty good indication where things are going. On the one, I do want to point out one item that we have requested of the system office is a budget request for the READY project. It's an $18 million ask that would really jumpstart that program. Trustee Duckett and others have worked very hard on that. There is a long-term plan of some, hopefully some federal investment and some private investment as well, but that's a game change. And you all know, I won't bore you with it, but that's a game changing vision for this university. The chancellor is really spearheading, and David Ruth's team has been incredible in that as well. But that money would go to the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research, so that the chancellor could then deploy those funds across all the schools that are part of that program. So that's exciting. We'll work through that as it goes through the budget process, but that is an ask that we have made. On the federal side, we told you back in March about the Biden administration's putting forth their skinny budget or their abbreviated budget. They did that in April. The full budget proposal should come out next week on the 27th. We are anticipating at that point, the House has indicated their propensity to move forward fairly quickly and bring the 12 spending bills that make up the federal budget for a floor action in July, which is warp speed for Congress these days. So more to follow on the federal front. But our federal team's been really working very hard with our delegation to get some budget requests and priorities through there. So more updates for us will be more in September. This is kind of the time of year for us, between May and July, you may have a budget update from Raleigh, but for us, you should get more substantive updates in the way of legislation that's passed and budgetary provisions coming probably maybe July, but most likely September. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would entertain any questions.
Are there any questions for Vice Chancellor Summers? Seeing none, we want to thank you, Vice Chancellor Summers, you and your team for all that you do and for the excellent report, and continue to advocate for us at the General Assembly. Thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. All right, and now would recognize Trustee Bullock for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the External Relations Committee go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statutes, Section 143-318.11, subset A, 1, to prevent the disclosure of privileged information under Section 126-22, and also pursuant to Section 143-318.11A2.
Second.
Heard the motion by Trustee Bullock, seconded by Trustee Pryor. Any debate and discussion? Seeing none, we'll move into a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The chair, opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion stands approved. We'll now go into closed session. We'll give TJ a chance to tidy things up.
All right, Rob, we're cutting the stream. Joanna, can we have this?
I see it for the External Relations Committee today. Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Trustee McCullen, seconded by Trustee Meekins. Any debate and discussion? Seeing none, will move into a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
All right, we're cutting the stream.